Hi guys, my name is Crystal and welcome to my YouTube channel, and it's lunchtime. Alexa, what's the time please?
It's 1:07 p.m.
So we are now going to cook this chicken tikka masala with lentil rice that I bought a bit earlier on from the co-op. Alexa, can you put, Alexa, exit YouTube. Alexa, can you put LBC radio on please?
LBC London from Global Player.
Free speech.
So I think even for adults trying to stay, use healthy content, safe content online, that idea of something being legal but harmful, I think is it takes in such a lot of content, doesn't it? I mean, it's pretty clear that the kind of content that Molly Russell was viewing was harmful and in many instances certainly should have been illegal. But even on the fairly, sort of small way that I use Instagram, for example, as an adult woman who said I can look after myself, some of the stuff on it is without a doubt about, beauty products, well, sold as beauty products or exercise and food, exercise and eating accounts and everything. They're not presented healthily. They're presented to make people hate themselves, loathe themselves, and think that they need this product in order to loathe themselves less or like themselves a bit more. That's not healthy. It's perfectly legal. It's perfectly legal. It's called the diet and exercise industry, or elements of the diet and exercise industry are woeful. So again, even as adults, we have to choose those parts of the industry that are not unhealthy, that are realistic and respectful and sensible. And it's not an easy job even as an adult. So Michelle Donlan also explained how companies will be fined and punished for not complying with the legislation.
Well, this would obviously be done on a case-by-case basis by the regulator, but it would depend on what they've done. The punishment has to fit the crime. If they grossly try to avoid the legislation, if they don't implement these changes, if they weren't protecting children, if they're allowing children to see illegal content, if they're allowing children to see harmful content, then I would fully anticipate that they would be expecting to see the maximum of these fines, and they know too well that is what is coming downstream, and they have equally been preparing for this.
Well, I'm joined by Imran Ahmed, and do give me a call on 0345 606 0973. Imran is the CEO of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, and we've spoken about this topic before on the programme. Imran, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Even in my reading of this story, I find it difficult to necessarily work out what might be legal but harmful and therefore should still be legal. Do you know what I mean? I mean, some of the stuff that Molly was looking at was legal but desperately harmful, and we should be taking active steps to remove at every minute of the day until it's gone.
Well, look, I completely agree with you, and that's why, legal but harmful was always terrible terminology, let's face it, because this is just harmful. This is harmful content that consumed with the pace at which these platforms serve it up to people. Let's never forget, they don't just host content, they algorithmically then serve it up to people. Our next report is looking at eating disorder content on one of the platforms, and my gosh, it's awful to see what young minds are exposed to and how quickly. But that was on that, can you give me a flavour of what you found there? I think the example that I cannot shake from my mind is that of a blade with I miss the feel of you on my skin being shoveled into the newsfeed of a child.
So making self-harm a thing of beauty, arguably.
Yes, and look, here's the thing though, the government introduced legal but harmful as its own definition. 6 years ago, when I set up CCDH, the key for me was to ensure that platforms enforce the community standards, because as you and I know, platforms have their cake and eat it too. They tell everyone, we've got these rules and we enforce them. And most of the debate is on perhaps they enforce them too vigorously. what we always said at CCDH was, that is nonsense. They don't enforce too vigorously. Quite the contrary, they barely enforce them at all. If platforms, as this bill now does, forces them to enforce their community standards, so this says, instead of the Secretary of State saying, here's a list of legal but harmful, we're going to hold you to your community standards. If you said to me 6 years ago, I can give you a bill that will make sure that they actually live up to their promises to users, I would have bitten your hand off. And I do think that a lot of the problems today in the politics of this are down to the government's own mistakes this summer in presenting two different bills, neither of which existed. One was presented by one side of the Conservative Party, saying that this is a woke bill, and the second was presented by another side, saying, no, this is a bill that will solve all your problems. It won't, but it is a step forward in the regulation. And right now, today, I think that, we don't have these protections in place. Once the bill is passed, social media in the UK will look different. It will be much less dangerous for young people and for adults, because those enforcement powers to say that you have to follow the rules on racism, for example, self-harm content, suicide content, they apply to everyone, not just to kids.
So, when it's passed, if it's passed, if I find, just giving a scenario here, if I find my niece has looked at something about self-harm or about suicide or about not eating, how do I proceed as a parent or an aunt or a teacher? How do I proceed to use this bill? How can I use this bill? Law.
So what the bill will do is say that platforms have to be incredibly clear on the way that they explain their rules. They'll have to make it easy for people to be able to bring a complaint against the rules, so accountability, so you know where to go to, and that they will have to take fair and fair action based on their rules against that content. And that's the promise that the bill gives. If they fail to enforce it, you could then report that to Ofcom. Ofcom are able to open an investigation, and that might end up with fines. And we don't know yet what the processes for Ofcom will be. That's next year's battle, which I'm not terribly looking forward to.
So essentially what you've described there is the rules that I broadcast under. So if I, on this programme, encouraged somebody to hurt themselves or gave them information on how to take their own lives, I would be hauled over the coals by Ofcom and possibly fined by Ofcom and possibly sacked by the people who put me on the radio in the first place. So is this about bringing those platforms, let's just say Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and bringing them up to broadcast standards that I would be familiar with?
In one respect, yes. And, again, I think I've talked about this with you before. They're not being held to the same standards that everyone else is. The truth is that the health and safety inspection regime, the ability to gather information, the ability to ask them to behave in a reasonable way, not in a negligent way, they just haven't existed in the past for social media companies. Now that we have them, what we have to see is what's that going to end up meaning for users and the protection of users. And my mission is not to the Tory party, the Labour party, to anyone else. It's to people who use social media, parents who worry about their kids on social media, Black and Asian and Jewish people who worry about racism that actually makes them feel unwelcome on social media platforms. This will be
or worse, in danger.
Or worse, or in danger, and that's why they don't feel welcome. Then I think it will, but this is not the end. Clearly, this is part one of an iterative process of building good regulations for the future.
I want to know why people posting content and...
Stop. So guys, this is my chicken tikka masala rice with lentils. It looks very, very tasty. I got this from the co-op this afternoon. When you rock the boat, you're not very popular. When you disagree with royalty, you're not popular. When you decide to fight back, like I am, from being abused for so long, you're not popular, right? It's as simple as that. Now I'm going to get on and enjoy the rest of my day. I'm a relatively insignificant person, and I'm just telling my story. Okay? That's all I'm doing. I'm going through life, telling my story about what's happened to me. And people have had far worse experiences in life than I have. Some people aren't here to tell the story, and I want to speak for them. The child that can't speak out because it's being abused, okay? It's being overlooked and abused, and many cases we hear of nearly every year is a child being mistreated and they've slipped through the net, they've slipped through the system, right? I was abused as a child. I want to be the voice of people that have been abused and haven't been able to speak out because of negativity, people's attitudes. I've even been called a dirty whore because my father did things to me, and that's so untrue. People don't like to admit they're wrong. My dad died, he never apologised, never said sorry, and he never admitted to what he'd done. Derek didn't. And I'm his daughter. And covering up by saying I'm somebody else is bullshit. And you're going to get the truth, and you're going to listen to the truth, and if you don't like it, not my problem. See you later.